the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we're joined by Kristen Morgan, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and proud sergeant with 5 years of service. Kristen's journey is one of profound transformation, both personally and professionally. From the moment she joined the Marine Corps just before 9/11, she began to shape her path, learning leadership, policy, and resilience. Her experience serving in Okinawa, combined with her natural curiosity for policy, led her on a path of continuous growth and discovery. After leaving the military, Kristen earned her master's in public administration and later a master's in tax. She has successfully built her own service-based business, which allows her the freedom to serve clients no matter where she and her family travel in their RV. A true embodiment of the entrepreneurial spirit, Kristen navigated the challenges of post-military life, embracing the hard work and self-reliance that have defined her career and personal growth. Today, we'll explore her unique journey, the challenges of transitioning from the military life to entrepreneurship, and how she has overcome the obstacles to create a life and business she is proud of. Join me in welcoming what it means to be a true embodiment of a strategic veteran, Kristen Morgan. Kristen, thanks for being here this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for that introduction. That's great.
Of course. So let's just jump right into it. Why the Marine Corps? Where'd you grow up? What inspired you to join?
Yeah, so I grew up in Syracuse, New York. Not a military family. No, my uncle was military, but he was the outlier, right? Like no one else was. And the group of friends that I was hanging out with at the time, a couple of them decided to join, and I got talking to the recruiter, and I didn't really have anything set up in life, right? Like I wasn't planning to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was very lost. And so friends joined and I followed suit, and away I went, and I loved it. They not so much. So that was the irony of it.
So that it was that simple. You didn't look at any other branches, just let's go to the Marine Corps.
Just
Here we
Marine
go.
Corps. Yep.
So that brings me to my next question. I've had several other women veterans on this show, and all of them, every single one of them, to my dismay, has talked about extra challenges that they faced when they get to their first duty station. So you don't have to answer this, but did you experience any of those things I would be hinting about? Sexual harassment, kind of just being looked at as less than because you're a female, MST, any of that stuff?
So you got to remember, I joined pre 9/11, right?
Okay.
So a lot of this MST kind of talk wasn't there. No, I didn't. I mean, I think if you look back, right, like Kristen today with this, very clear definition of sexual trauma and sexual harassment, all of that, I think someone like the same version or the same me could join now and think some of that stuff might have been. But at the time, no. I mean, I was just talking to my brother the other day about Marines and the shenanigans that we do, right? And I remember in my shop when I was corporal, maybe Lance Corporal, right? And for some reason, smacking ass was the thing to do, right? And people would just walk around, hey man, smack butt, right? And my butt got smacked and I smacked butt, and it was just fun. Nobody took offense. But I also think that if people did, I mean, there were guys also in the shop who were don't do that, right? And I feel like there was a level, at least in the groups that I ran in, that we were all right, And so you didn't bother that person. I just didn't experience the same level of stuff. I think some of it might be me too, right? I have thick skin. Things that bother other people, I find funny also, right? And I just don't open myself up to certain conversations, things will be happening and I just walk away, I just don't.
Just shut it down immediately.
Yeah. I'm not interested in that and I leave, so I guess I wasn't as sociable as some other people, you know what I mean? Some people want to be really in the group and I'd be y'all are dumb and I would leave,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I didn't have that same experience.
Well, that's refreshing. So, it's always good that you had a good experience, and it always sucks to hear the other women talk about their experiences. And,
Yeah.
I was largely blind to it, just being, again, I joined in 2003. So before integration of females into combat arms and all of that. So I wasn't around it. I didn't, in fact, it was kind of the opposite for us. Like in the infantry units I was in, we were told to stay away from women because they'll ruin your career. Right. Like that's just how it went. So I didn't get to see it. So I'm glad it didn't happen to you. Let's talk about go ahead.
I would say, so that being said, like I didn't have those challenges, right? But I did have other challenges because I was a woman, right? And in 2001, men in the Marine Corps, at least the men, again, that I was around, they still had very much that like, I got it, I can help you mentality, right? But then there was this other group that was like, you're a Marine, you can do it, right? And so there was this push and pull of like some guys in the shop who were like, no, my mom would be mad at me if I didn't help you. My sister would, like the kind of like chauvinistic, but not in a bad way, chauvinistic, right? Like that very like caretaking man, right? That's like, no, I'm going to help the woman. I'm going to hold the door for you. I'm going to pick up the heavy stuff, right? So there was that. And so I battled like, I got it, right? And then there was the other side of things where they were like, I'm extra not going to help you because you're a woman and you can do it on your own, right? Because they were trying to prove a point of like, their view of women in the military or whatever, right? So there was a push and pull of that, right? Like those challenges happened, right? Just being, I think they told me when I joined, like the recruiter, so who knows, I never looked the statistic up, that like 5% of the Marine Corps was women at the time that I joined, and like 3 or 4% was officer. And here I am, a Lance Corporal, Corporal Sergeant, So like such a small minority of the population at the time. And then like the war happened, right? And so like culturally, there was those struggles, right? But still, I find that more of the guys that I was with were helpful and great, as opposed to the people that gave me a hard time just for the sake of being a woman. You know what I mean? So it's different struggles, different.
Well, shout out to the units that you were in and the guys you were around.
Seventh crime, if you can believe it.
Yeah. So you joined the Marine Corps. What was your job, and where were you stationed?
Yeah, so I went obviously boot camp, right, Parris Island,
yeah, of course.
And then I went to 29 Palms for communication school. So I became a technician, computers, tactical telephones, switchboards, that kind of stuff. And then went to Okinawa, spent 2 years there. I was actually in Oki when Iraq broke out, and then came back to Pendleton for my last 2 years. So I had a 5-year contract.
5-year contract and then done. Any deployments?
No, just Okinawa. But it wasn't a deployment at the time, right? Like it's been a deployment, then it wasn't a deployment. So I don't count it.
I'm jealous. I would have loved to have been stationed in Okinawa. I've heard nothing but good things about anybody who's been there. I had an Army buddy that got stationed over there. Luckily, he spent like 4 or 5 years over there. Wow. He said it was the most amazing time of his life.
Yeah. We wanted to go back, and then my husband decided to retire.
Damn it.
That's what I said.
So what was it like serving in Okinawa for 2 years, and how did it impact your outlook on life and leadership? Yeah,
so Oki was, at the time, everyone used to joke that Oki was the real Marine Corps. I don't really know what that means, but that, anyone that was going to be a question
I was going to have is like, what does that mean?
So what we were told at the time, right? Like, remember, young Lance Corporal Kristen, it was that like over there, you could do kind of like the traditional Marine stuff. You didn't have the policy, right? Like when you're stateside, apparently there's more like policy stuff that they worry about.
I totally know what you're talking about. You're talking about being away from the flagpole.
Yeah. So, I really feel like they really gave us leadership opportunities, right? Like the rank structure was legitimate, right? Like if you were a corporal and you told a Lance Corporal to do something and that Lance Corporal questioned you, other corporals and sergeants would come in, your staff sergeant would have your back. And so you were really given latitude to kind of learn what works, learn how to talk to people. And then you had, at least I had, right? Like the staff NCOs and the mentors that would guide you, right? Like, so if we messed up something, right? Like if we, I don't know, told someone they couldn't do something when really they were supposed to do it or whatever, right? That Lance Corporal that I, as a corporal, just told to do something wouldn't get in trouble because I told him to do it. And then I, depending on obviously the level of severity, would be guided on how I messed that up. Like I remember one time I was standing in front of formation and I dismissed incorrectly, right? And I got corrected, right? But it wasn't this correction that was career ending or, right? Like it was just like, okay, I messed that up. Now I'm going to go try it again and get it right the next time. And so I just feel like that was very helpful there. And my peers stateside, I don't think had that. Like they just had a different experience. And I'm not going to speak for them, but just when I say those things, people are like, what? You did what? So I think a lot of guidance, and you're away from home, right? So 2 years away from all things that you know and are comfortable with, we had to become a little family of our own over there. And you had to learn to get along with people who you couldn't stand, right? Like, I mean, my husband became roommates with someone that like they got into a fight, like a physical fight in the shop. And Gunny was like, fabulous, y'all two are going to be roommates, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like work it out.
Oh yeah.
And so like I didn't have that. I never had that, but that was the norm over there, So yeah, I thought it was a great experience.
It sounds
learning
like a
the new
really
culture, right? Like you're 18, you've never done anything or been anywhere outside of, your hometown, for me anyway, right? Couple of vacations.
Go live in a foreign country for 2 years.
Yeah, you have to learn a new language, new food, new everything, and respect it, not dismiss it. Yeah.
How was the culture shock?
I mean, it's pretty big, right? Like I'm from upstate New York. I knew nothing about Japanese food or culture or anything, but we loved it. Like I said, we wanted to go back. We were dating at the time, my husband and I, and we both decided to extend for a second year, and then came back stateside. And we spent the rest of his career trying to go back multiple times, and it never worked out. But it was amazing. I mean, the Japanese culture is such, and maybe this is why Marines like it, at least the Marines I socialize with. It's such a culture of respect, like they're like foundationally, they are about respecting people and life and the land. And it was fabulous. We loved it.
It seems to me too, that like in your off time, something about the Japanese culture, it's centered around peace and outdoors and nature and kind of that mutual, like you were talking about, respect. So for me, kind of knowing what I know now about my healing journey and all of that, seems like a really good place to kind of escape the military hardships and all of that you deal with when you're on your time off, and just kind of be immersed in a culture that really understands all of that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were outside all the time, right? We were at the beach, we were hiking, we were doing something.
Climbing some mountain somewhere. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you talk about your passion for policy. Let's explore that a little bit. Where does that come from? And specifically, what about policy do you like?
So interesting. I have no idea where it comes from. I have thought about this over my life, right? Because I do enjoy it. The best I can come up with is I come from an Irish family. My dad and my mom are Irish, but my dad specifically is a man who, when he has an opinion, he has an opinion, right? And so like growing up around him and his siblings, there was lots of robust debates, right? And I would hear these things. And sometimes I'd be like, well, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense, right? Like when I'm a kid listening to this stuff. And I think that's maybe where it started, right? Like this idea of like listening to people who love each other very much, but have very different viewpoints, like really duke it out and try to figure out who's right or where there might be common ground. I think like that's as far back as I can go to like sort it out maybe, but I'm still unsure. Like I enjoy the problem solving of it, right? Like I enjoy here's the problem. What are our options for a solution? What are the consequences to those particular options? And what's the best course of action to move forward?
So when talking about policy, do you like writing policy? Do you like interpreting policy? Do you like implementing policy? Do you like all of the above? Like what are we talking about when we're talking about policy?
Yeah, so I like understanding it, right? Like I'm not the person that's going to write the law for you. But the conversation about if we go here, what will that result in, right? I like that. So it's definitely more the implementation of it, right? Like, how does this look? How do specifically, right? Like, how do we apply policy to, in in my past jobs, military families, and then how do we apply the tax code, right? The tax law. How does that apply to your situation, right? Like, let's read the law, see what it says, and how can we make sure that you're paying what you're required to in taxes, but not
no more.
anything more, right? So you have to understand the policy.
That's pretty cool. Now we're going to move to my favorite part, and we're going to talk about the transition. And you did 5 years and your husband stayed in. And I think this is going to make for a really interesting kind of exploration of your transition, because dual military going to single military, and I got to witness this a little bit with my sister and her husband. He got out before she did. She stayed active duty. So let's talk about your transition. First, what made you decide to get out? What was the reason that you didn't want to stay in the Marines?
I liked policy and I didn't want to tech anymore. That was it. We used to like, I was a platoon sergeant at one point, and we used to banter about whatever silly policy was coming down, right? Like, don't put your hands in your pockets, whatever.
Yeah, why? You give me 30 pockets on a uniform and I can't use a single fucking one of them. I don't understand.
Me neither. Even after hours of debate, we never figured it out. But it was fun. There's, a couple of us that we would sit there and enjoyed it, and we would banter all about, and that's when I really learned that I really liked that aspect of life. And if I could have figured out how to stay in the Marine Corps and done that, I probably would have. But I had to tech for several more years before I got into policy, and I just didn't want to do it. So it was that simple. I was like, I don't want to tear apart computers anymore. I don't want to do it.
So what challenges then did you face when you're getting out?
Social was the biggest challenge for me. So, right, like when I'm wearing the uniform, my husband's shop was we were married when I got out. He was right down the road from me, right? Like, we would walk to get lunch together. If I called his shop to like see when they were getting off for lunch so we could meet up, for example, right? I was one of the guys. Like, I was like, hey, what's going on, Morgan? You know what I mean? Like, I was cool. I could just pop into their shop. I did when he was deployed. I would just like pop in because half of them were my buddies too, right? And then I transitioned out and new people came in and our friends rotated elsewhere or EAS'd themselves. And now there's this whole crop of people, and I show up at the shop in civilian clothes and they're like, oh, yes, ma'am. How are you? You know what I mean? And I was like, I'm one of you. What are you doing? And so that was probably the hardest part for me, is like losing that sense of belonging, because I'm a woman, so I don't look the part, right? And there's no, like, unless I tell someone, unless I advertise it, they don't know, right? Like, I don't wear the uniform anymore.
That is such an interesting point, and I'm glad you make it, because I can remember feeling like this myself. When I was going through the med board process, they do everything they can to open up what's called an MTO slot in the company to replace you. And they do that as soon as possible. Like, so as soon as I entered the med board process, they detailed me over to range control. So now I got civilians in front of me. So I'm not around the company AO every day like I was before. And it's like a 6-month kind of stint over there, because that's supposed to be long enough that, your med board goes through, you get out, whatever. And then that MTO slot is open. They're already replacing you. So that happened to me. And I went from being a platoon sergeant in a company on a deployment where I was somebody to, while I was on that range control stint, I would have to come back to the company every now and again. I just watched the turnover happen, and I'd walk in there as a senior E6 and people wouldn't know who I was. And they'd be like, who the fuck are you? And why are you here? And it's like, motherfucker, you don't know? Like I actually am kind of, not to toot my own horn, but I was kind of a big deal in that company through the deployment, after the deployment. And then the med board starts and it's like, fuck, you don't matter anymore at all. It's just kind of a testament to how well-oiled and fast the machine of the military moves. So I absolutely relate to what you're saying about that, because I would show up in uniform, and they still wouldn't know who you are. And it's like, man, this is awful. Now, did you experience any challenges with kind of loss of identity or purpose, or maybe not, because you got out knowing you didn't want to tech anymore and wanted to get involved in policy?
Yeah, no, major sense of like, what do I do now? Right. Like, I wanted to get into policy, but I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know really how to do it. I didn't have anyone in my life to look at that had gotten into policy that had, I did some campaigning for a bit. I worked in political positions.
How awful was that?
Like staff.
I can't imagine working on
I wouldn't do
political.
it now. I wouldn't do it now.
It,
But
different times, right?
when I did it, I feel like it was like it was better. Like it wasn't as
I think anybody
yeah.
listening to this will understand, given
Yeah.
the current climate,
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. But I think that like there wasn't even a whole lot of resources as far as, right, like all of the workshops and trainings that vets get now, right? Like that wasn't available at the time.
When did you get out?
I got out in 2006.
Okay, yeah.
So I've been out for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine, because I got out in 2015, and there's far more resources now than there was in 2015. I can only imagine going back 8 more years and seeing what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, I wanted to get into policy. I wanted to go that route, but how? What do I do? I didn't have like mentors to lead me, to guide me. And so I really was throwing just anything I could at the wall to see what might work and what didn't work. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely felt alone. I got to the point that because my husband stayed in, right? So now I'm following him around, moving every 3 years with him. And when you get to a new duty station, then I was definitely looked at as just the wife, and so, yeah, it was lonely. I stopped telling people that I was even a veteran. Like it got exhausting, right? Like we'd be out someplace meeting new friends of his, and it was like every time we had to say like, no, I'm a veteran too. Like, you know what I mean? And it just got to the point that I stopped. And for several years, unless it came up in conversation naturally, I stopped offering that information to people. And I had friends that I had met, and we'd been friends like 2 years. And then
they didn't know.
And then something would come up and they'd be like, oh my God, what? And I was like, yeah, I was. And I just let it go, right? Like I didn't. So that ability to like get out of the military, the Marine Corps specifically, and have that pride of being a Marine, it was a long time before I had that. It wasn't until probably my husband started to talk about getting out and transition that any sense of pride came. I mean, I had my own internal pride, right? But like that pride of like sharing with the world that you have this experience, I really hid that for a long time.
What kind of toll did that take on you emotionally?
Wow. No one's ever asked that before.
Well, I think it's important that somebody asks that, because I don't think that you're the only one who maybe has been through this. And I do think it's an important question because, I'm very proud of my service. However, external circumstances now make me question a lot of that. But there's still that sense of pride in serving something bigger than yourself, and to feel like, you shouldn't. You said something that really kind of pisses me off, is you were just looked at like the wife. And I think that's bullshit, right? Like that's
agreed, 100%.
That's really just closed-mindedness. Like, the military, yes, while it's largely male dominated, for I'm sure a million reasons we could sit here and dive into if we wanted to, at the end of the day, there are people, women who serve, and just try to have an open mind when you look at people. Like, it's not inconceivable to think that this man is married to another Marine, right? Like it just isn't, so I really am curious to know, like, what did that? Because I know that there were adverse side effects from you shoving that down, putting it in that box, and just not paying attention to it. So, what kind of toll did that take on you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, first off, I take your point about the getting angry about it, right? At the same time, I think when it is a male-dominated industry, right, like it is a rarity, and I get that, right? Like I mean, we look at organizations in the term of like generalities, and I understand that, right? So like intellectually, I understand why people don't look at me and think, oh yeah, you were a Marine, right? Like I get it. So I do have compassion on that regard. And I don't think that being just the, right, like, so I quote it, like just the wife, right? Like, no. Like I had a harder time in some respects being just the wife than I did active duty. So that's not dismissive at all. That's almost annoyance that that's the way that it's looked at oftentimes. But I guess I think that probably like the sense of loneliness is probably the most like thing that I had to deal with. Right. And it was like this identity. For 5 years, I was a Marine. And I had this very focused purpose, right? And people looked at that and thought, like, you're contributing, you're doing something positive for our society. And then you get out and you kind of lose that connection to the organization, right? Like, we still have our friends and people, right? But the organization I was disconnected from. And so that was lonely, right? And like, and probably sometimes still, right? Like, I have friends that are dual first sergeants that just retired a couple of months ago. And, after 20 years, this badass first sergeant feels very similar to how I feel, as far as like, you go out to eat and people very clearly look at her husband and think like, oh, you're a Marine, right? And then come over, thank them, shake their hand, whatever. And she or he has to say, my wife is too, right? So it's that kind of like instant connection. You kind of have to like fight, like, to get into it a little bit, like, no, wait, bring me too. And so that's hard, right? And so it's kind of like a lonely feeling, I think, is probably the best feeling I could describe. I've never really sat on that, though, to like really think through all the emotions that come with it.
Well, now you've got an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So that also, I'm sure there were other challenges, being that your husband is, still active. You're out now. What kind of challenges came with that? I'm sure it perpetuates kind of that feeling of missing, where you just spent, a significant chunk of your life. Like, you're not a part of it anymore, but you're very much still a part of it, right? So you're like kind of in this purgatory, if you will. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, sometimes it was nice because he would bring something home and we could talk about it and I understood, right? So in some ways it was very helpful to him in his career and us in our relationship that there was this like really soul connecting thing that we still could share together, right? But no, I think a lot of the challenge was that I did slowly start to transition and look at the Marine Corps from a different lens, right? Like, I was no longer in it trying to live and follow the rules. I was going into like more policy understanding and learning how that's made and why that's made, right? And so I would look at things and I'm like, that is the dumbest. Why are they doing, right? Like, this doesn't make sense. And he's still in the institution. And so he's like, babe, what do you want me to do about it? It's the Marine Corps order, da, 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 right? And so I'm like, no, this, and so I think that was probably harder than anything, is to find a way to support him while looking at it, thinking like, that's a dumb policy. That's going to, you know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be helpful at all. That, I would look at something and I'm like, well, now you're going to be working an extra 3 weeks on solving that problem, right? Where it could be solved in a day and a half or whatever.
We all realize that while we're in, and they give us dumb policies. We're like, what in the fuck is this? And why did you just make my life so much more complicated?
Right,
yeah.
Right. But there's nothing you can do, really, right? No. Like, you just have to say yes, sir, and go about it. And then here comes me, like, well, you should tell your boss that. And he's like, really? I should tell my boss, Like,
he's probably looking at you like, look, lady, you know right. how this works,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
like, I can't just do that.
Many of those conversations. Yeah. Remember when you were in? Yeah, happened a lot. So yeah, I mean, I think it was for us in our relationship and the type of people that we are, it was helpful that I had that understanding, because he could be more open with me and just speaking like the language of the Marine Corps, right? He didn't have to explain what a certain acronym meant or anything like that,
And there's a million of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's awesome too. I think it might be even a testament to how strong you get. I mean, you guys been together since you were, I don't even know, you said at least 18, right? I'm gathering that much. And I have no idea how old you are now, but I assume it's a long time, over a decade. And so I think that probably kind of lent itself well to, that strong relationship. I'm a victim of getting involved in a relationship, and they don't understand that the Army is always going to come first, no matter how much I want to put anybody else first, right? Like, the Army is the Army, and and then that causes problems in the relationship. So I imagine for you guys, it was kind of a relief for him, and even for you, like, you understand what's coming down the pipe if he changes and stays in for a career. Deployments, field problems, this thing's going to pop up here and I'm going to have to be gone for this many days or weeks or months or whatever. And so am I on the right track with that? Like,
you are, except for recruiting duty.
Oof.
Yeah. On recruiting duty, it was so miserable that I one time got so mad at him. I said, I hate the Marine Corps. And he was like, you're ridiculous, and then I'm saying it much nicer than it was said at the time. But he was like, you're ridiculous. You don't hate the Marine Corps. And I said, listen, I can hate the Marine Corps. I can hate you. And I'm going to choose to hate the Marine Corps right now because I'm so miserable. Right. And I wanted him out. I told him, on recruiting duty, it's probably like a year and a half in, right? Recruiting's 3 years. Like a year and a half, I was like, I want you out. And he looked at me and said, I'm not getting out. And in the moment, right, like, we had to do some work on that. You know what I mean? Like, but then we got off of recruiting and he gets to his next unit. And the first thing that he says is like, I want to get on a deployment. He never did from there, but he wanted to go, he wanted to do something. And we had this like running deal, like say yes, and then come home and let me know what happened. Right. So I was very able to support him and understand his needs and his passion for the Marine Corps and what the expectation is on the Marine Corps. I also understood once the war started to die down, those like small deployments, right? The onesies and twosies, you had to say yes now. If he waited to like go home and talk to me and see what I thought and then go back to work, the opportunity's gone. So we had a very clear agreement about that, right? Like say yes.
Well, I think that's very awesome of you, by the way, because that very much affects his career, right?
Absolutely.
And so for you to say yes and then come home and tell me, and for you to be kind of rock solid in your morals on that and like ready and prepared to deal with, if I say yes, I could be gone for up to a year. You know what I mean? Like you're prepared for that. That's awesome of you. So kudos to you for that.
Well, thankfully it never happened. He did a 6-month one, but I don't say that to like just dismiss the hardness of it. Like I was aware that it was going to be hard still. Right. But he loved the Marine Corps. He wanted to do his part, and how do I love someone and then hold them back from that? That just doesn't make sense. So what
was it about recruiting that made you so angry?
Because you're not the only, in itself.
Right. You're not the only one I've heard this from. Recruiting and drill sergeant from the Army seems to blow up relationships. Like,
yeah,
unequivocally, probably more than, well, maybe not more than deployments, but drill sergeant duty, you're 0-4 to basically 0-4 every day. Like you're not sleeping, you're never home. 3 years of that. Recruiting duty, depending on where you get stationed. Back in the day, I don't know what it's like now because I don't know what we're putting in or whatever, but I know at least when I was in, recruiting duty was pretty rough also. Long hours, never home, always traveling, always somewhere, always working, never really getting out of the uniform and putting it away. Is that kind of on the right track?
Yes. And I think every RS has different experiences, right? Like we have friends who went back to recruiting afterwards, right? Like we know people who became career recruiters. With us, the thing that was so frustrating is that, part of it was the policy side of things, right? So I had that lens,
I knew that was going to be
like,
part of it.
What is this? They had him, for example, like he was out, we're in Michigan. And so he was out at the Meijer grocery stores at like midnight trying to recruit people. And I would be like, that is dumb. Like, what kind of person are you going to recruit from the grocery store at midnight, right?
Not one that's qualified to join.
Exactly. So anyway, from my point of view, I felt like it was a hazing experiment, right? Like there was nothing that was actually going to yield results at that time of night after night after night after night. And this is just one example, right? And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is not, you don't give two shits about these Marines. They are just numbers to you. They are just bodies, right? Because if you get enough bodies on the street talking to people, then you're going to meet your quota, right? Like it's just a numbers game. Flood the market with Marines to talk to kids and you'll get them. But there was no, like everything the Marine Corps stands for, right? Like that take care of one another, have each other's back. I mean, it was ruthless And it was just right. So like I would get so mad because I'm like, you're selling something that, yeah, it's like that in the fleet maybe, but here on recruiting duty, this is not the same institution that you're selling. Like they're not living what they're selling. And so my policy brain just was exploding every day. It didn't make sense to me.
I agree with you. You'll get your numbers if you flood the market. I'm a testament to that because I was on R&R from one of my many deployments. I was walking around somewhere and an Army recruiter stopped me on the street. I'll never forget it. He was an E5. I was an E6 at the time, so it had to be my third or fourth deployment. And he stops me, and I just kind of got a little leave beard going on or whatever. And he's like, "Hey, man, you ever thought about joining the Army?" So I played along, and I did. I played along, and I let him give
poor
me
guy
a
had to work till midnight because of you.
No, this was middle of the day, like lunchtime. I think I was grabbing lunch or getting a haircut. I don't know what I was doing. It was towards the end of my leave, but he stops me, and I listened to his like rant for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then I just pulled out my ID card. I was like, "Look, buddy, I've got more time in combat than you have in the Army." And his jaw just hit the floor. He's like, "I'm so sorry, dude." I was like, hey, kudos to you for you being out here, putting yourself out there and doing your job. Like, that's awesome. Good for you. I hope that you get somebody. It's just, I've already been gotten. In fact, I'm on my way back. You know what I mean? Let's now talk about your path back to purpose. And you combine policy into starting your own business. And this is for me really like, I think this is the way forward for a lot of struggling veterans who can't really put their finger on what it is they're supposed to be doing in life. And it's really figuring out what your core beliefs and values are, what your passion is, and then turning that into something that generates you time and income freedom. And that doesn't have to be millions and millions of dollars. That's different for whatever you define that to be. So what inspired you to transition the public policy into tax? I mean, obviously the connection is there. The tax code is, for all intents and purposes, a fucking nightmare, and it changes. It seems like every 3 years it's always changing. So what inspired you to get the entrepreneurial bug and say, this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a business doing this.
Yeah. Again, it was kind of by accident. So I had just finished my first master's, and we knew we were in Georgia. We knew we were going to be leaving in like 3 months. Right. And so I was like, well, it doesn't make sense to really find a job. Right. And I knew someone who owned their own tax company. Right. And so she's like, "Hey, listen, we just need like 6 weeks of help. You want to come help?" And I was like, "Taxes? What are you talking about?" Right. Like, I'm a policy person. I'm not a numbers person. Right. She's like, "Listen, come. So I went and I helped her for 6 weeks, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. And so I kind of like, it was there in my head of like the intrigue of how we develop the tax code and then how that impacts a person's day-to-day life, right?
So you're starting to see the connection between your love of policy and how you can help others.
Right. But I had always had a love of the Marine Corps still, right? Like despite recruiting, right? Like I like the Marine Corps. I do love the Marine Corps, right? Like it is a part of me. And so we were moving back to California. And so I knew that I wanted to become a family readiness officer. So I went from that, and then I worked into politics a little bit, right? And then I became a family readiness officer. And so I was very like policy focused, but then the first government shutdown happened, right? Way back in when was that? 2013?
Yeah, 2013. It might have even been 2012, I think.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because we had just come home from Afghanistan to find out we're not going to get paychecks. And I was like, excuse me.
Right.
You might be right. It might have been early 2013, something like that. But yeah, that checks. Yep.
And so, so I had just, same thing, right? Like we had just moved, I had just started a job, and I was like, what do you mean I'm not going to get paid? Right. Like, and that first one, we didn't know we were going to get back pay. Like everyone thought we were going to be furloughed indefinitely. Like we had no idea how long it was going to right? Like now we know the game, and it's like, you'll get back paid, right? Anyway. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I started to think, and I went back to this, like, well, my friend had her tax business, and that's still poly, right? And so I started to connect the dots there. And I went and I worked for one of the big tax
H&R
companies.
Block.
Yeah, one of them. And I was like, okay, like this will get me through, right? Until I can, like, now that I'm going to lose my job, it'll get me through so that I have a buffer to be able to figure out the next step. Anyway, I did that and I was like, this is fabulous. Like it, and it wasn't the numbers. It was somebody coming in and sitting down in front of me and saying, you know, I started my own business and I don't know what to do with all these deductions, or I just had a baby this year, or I went on deployment and I have all this tax-free income and I don't know how that impacts my taxes. And so like solving those problems, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like I love the Marine Corps and I love families. And so I'm helping families solve problems as it relates to the military lifestyle, right? And so it just started, like everything kind of fell into place. So it started accidentally. It started with this just like 1 6-week gig helping a friend. And it just over time grew to be something where like everything made sense. And it was like, that's what you're supposed to do, Kristen. You're supposed to figure out how to solve problems and help people in your community, right? Right now, the vast majority of my clients are military or military connected, right? Maybe it's a kid of a military member or whatever. But that made sense, right? Like I can take this very complex tax code and make it make sense to my military buddies, right? And they can scream and yell and cuss at me and I don't take offense like a normal tax professional might, right? Like
You totally understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. And so that's how it happened, right? Like it just all clicked.
Well, and you're going to end up with another client if you have room, because I don't want to think of, well, it's really hard because this year will be the first year with the business that I've had to file taxes since I've been out, because VA money's tax free.
Oh, right.
So there's like, what am I doing? I'm not going to pay somebody to do my taxes when there's no taxes to do. You know what I mean? So I very much don't like to deal with things like that. So it's just like, hey, Kristen, here you go. This is all my stuff. Tell me what else you need and save me as much money as possible, because I don't want to pay the government any more than I've already paid them.
Yep. And then you want to think about like the future planning, right? Like what can you do now in hopes of reducing tax liability for next tax season, right? Like how can you grow your business, keep money in your pocket, invest in future you, right? Like how can you do these things all within the tax code?
And I'm sure you have all money, the answers.
Right? Well, the tax code's big. I have a lot of answers, you know, sometimes I have to do my own research, but
you have more knowledge than I care to ever have about that. I mean, you got a damn master's in tax. Like I didn't know that was a thing. So good for you.
It's very fun. Yeah.
Did you battle imposter syndrome when you started?
Oh yeah. I still battle it. Still. I'm ready to pivot the company, you know, the business to do one thing. And I'm like, oh God, can I really do that? I don't know. I'm not like this. You know what I mean? Just trying to think of changing something up in business makes me question myself.
I love this because it's a testament, right? Like, so no matter where you're at on your journey and your business ownership, from starting to being in the thick of it to scaling, you will always battle imposter syndrome. Always, always, always. So what do you do to get over that?
Well, I think like most people who get over it, I have a really solid support system, right? Nobody in my family had ever started a business. So I didn't have anyone to lean on again, right? Like to like guide me to do it. But my family and my close friends have my back, right? And so when I start to doubt myself, like they're my cheerleaders, right? Like they come in and they're like, Kristen, what are you talking about? And they, you know, they give me that like that personal side of things. Like this is you as a person, and this is how it'll impact your business. And then I have friends who are fellow business owners, right? And so they'll give me that like, okay, stop. Let's think about this from the business lens. So I get it from both sides, which is helpful. And then I mentioned that I am Irish. I'm just kind of stubborn, right? Like I'm like, no, I am going to do this. Yeah, and I just put my head down and I go and I do it. And that's how it is.
It's so great that so having the support of your friends and family, whether or not they're entrepreneurs or not, is obviously, you know, something powerful, but growing your network of business owners is uber important. And I can't talk about that enough, because that's where you learn all of the things you can't learn elsewhere, basically. by finding mentors, coaches, I don't know, your background with any of that. I assume that you have mentors in the space that you're in. I assume that you've gotten coaching, whether that's paid coaching or just, doing different phone calls or meetings with other people who then give you advice. And that's basically how I operate. I've never actually paid for coaching. I paid to be a part of a community that's lended itself to giving me mentors and coaching, but never directly paid for one-on-one coaching, but see the value in it. I just got lucky with how everything lined up for me. I didn't really need to hire a coach because I had access to a community, which is just as good. Anything like that for you? Are you part of communities that help you with that? Or, do you have several mentors that help you?
Yeah. So I'm not part of, there's not like one organization that's like my all-inclusive, right? Syracuse University's EBV program.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm on the short list for next year. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I got pushed through the first round. They sent me back a long sheet of like, this is what you can do to make yourself more competitive. So I've done that and more. Their original phone call to me was like, hey, we're closed for 2024. We wanted to give you a heads up. Are you willing to wait till 2025? I'm chomping at the bit. I can't wait until that comes out because I've heard nothing but good things. I'm also hooked up with the ACP mentor. So that's even, he's the one that pushed me into the IVMF, the EBV program. Did you actually go through it?
I did the ACP. I heard about it the same way. So I did the ACP and then they mentioned EBV. So I did that and I've gone back they had like an EBV reunion, and that group of people is the people that I stay in touch with the most. And the thing that's interesting is that they're not the way, at least when I went through it, the way it was explained was that the way that they try to build their cohorts is they don't want everyone, they want people that are in different industries, right? They don't want all accountants in the group, right? So I was the only one with that background in the group, but I've maintained those connections and those relationships with several people. And that almost is more valuable, right? Like I have circles and groups of people who are tax specific, right? Like I'm struggling with a particular account. I don't know what to do with, this thing or whatever. I need some guidance. I call people in the industry and like, hey, let's talk through this together. Right. But the Syracuse EBV folks, it's different. It's back to the Marine Corps. My husband and I spoke the same language, so he could vent to me and we could talk when I got out because he didn't have to explain the acronyms, right? When you're talking with other business people, they have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk tax, but they have a full understanding what I talk about when I talk business. And that has been more powerful than anything, I feel like, for me. Just having people, because especially when we talked about the imposter syndrome, right? When you talk about other trainings that are out there, I have folks that have been to other Syracuse University trainings. And then they call me and they're like, Kristen, you need to go to this one. And I give them all the reasons that I can't or whatever. And they're like, no, you need to put this on your calendar. You need to do it, right? And so they really do help like navigate the business side of things and support, not just like be the cheerleader, but they're like, this is the tool you need to, like, I know what you're going through in business. This is the tool you need. This is how you get it. So yeah, you're going to love Syracuse. It's amazing.
I'm going to be selfish for a minute. Will you talk about EBV and kind of break down the program for us and kind of what you went through and what specifically you gained in each? Because I think it's 3 sections, right? Like you do online and then you go to campus for a little bit and then you have like another week or so online or something. I can't remember. I'm trying not to look at it because it makes me impatient
you're ready to
because
go.
I really and like it's not a sure thing. I have no idea if I'm going to get picked up or not, right? Like I'm like fingers crossed, hoping and praying that like I have done everything I can to make myself competitive.
Are they asking for letters of reference or anything?
Oh
like
yeah.
that?
My ACP mentor wrote me the best letter of recommendation. That's actually what got me moved on from, the application process to the competing to get picked up in one of the classes next year. And that letter he wrote me was, I don't even know how to explain. I don't really have words for it. It was so good. And I felt so undeserving of it, but he was like, he's my ACP mentor. And he's like, I don't write these unless I actually believe in what you're doing and see a future for you. And he's constantly telling me, you're going to make millions of dollars. Don't worry about that. Like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm so eager. And now I get to talk to you about EBV, and it's amazing. So I just want to be selfish for a minute. And I want to hear about that program.
Yeah. So for me, and I know they've partnered with Bunker Labs now. And so they're doing, so some of it might be different, right? But there was an online portion, right? And so you had to do that. And then it was a 10-day in-person, like, intensive, right?
And they pay for that, right? Except for the travel to and from, I think. I think they pay for your stay while you're at the thing now. At least that's what the website says.
Yeah. I think that we had travel and lodging paid for, but maybe you're right. Maybe it was just the lodging. I know some of their programs are different. Like, there's one that they host in Texas every year, and that one I know is just lodging. So
either way, it's worth the investment for just the travel.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to buy a plane ticket to somewhere or drive a few hours, like, definitely worth it. Yeah. So the intensive was intense. They cover also, right? Like, they hit the gamut of business, right? Like, the marketing women are amazing. Then there's like some personal, like, just personal awareness type training, right? Like, how your face looks when you're talking to people, right? Like, the whole communication training about, like, the percentages of communication that's verbal and nonverbal, right? Like, the whole spectrum there.
Getting into sales psychology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it cost of goods sold, right? Like, I said marketing, just like all of the different, right? Like, there's an accounting session where they come in and, like, talk about, like, not only how do you build your reports, but how do you read those reports and what do you do there? And then the really cool part that we did, and who knows if the curriculum's changed, but the cool thing that they did for us is we had someone come in and help us write a pitch. So at the end of all of the 10 days, right, we all had to get up and present our own pitches, right, as if you're pitching to an investor. And diving into your own business with the mentorship that they have come in and talk to you, and like that, it's a free guidance from experts, right? We had someone who was an investor came in and was giving us our classes on how to build a pitch, right? So here's this guy who listens to pitches day after day after day, gives his money away, and he's helping us craft and figure out what questions to answer for someone we want to pitch. It was that, right? Like, the content. I mean, I have notes and notes and notes, and I still refer back to them, right? And I went 3 years ago. And I still will pull out my EBV notes sometimes. Like, man, there was something about and anyway, but there's that. But then it was the community. It was the network. It was the people that you met. And they have, for us, at the end of all of it, we had like an alumni dinner with those of us that were graduating. And so they brought in other people that had previously gone through the program and have successful businesses. And maybe GovCon is like, they've got a bunch of GovCon people that, come in and they just sit next to you and talk to you like you're a normal person, just like them. There's no element of like, well, I'm on the, Fortune 500 list, or I'm, Inc. 5000 or whatever. And you're just a little lifestyle business traveling in your RV. Like, I had these guys who have $1 million contracts, right? And they have said to me like, oh my God, how do you do it? And I'm like, how do I do it? Like, I travel in my RV and have a lifestyle business. How do you do it? You've got 100 employees. But there's a level of like
it's
humility
respect,
and
right?
Yeah. And that the common connection of being military, right? So everyone knows that everyone is there and has like an immense work ethic and strong value system, right? Because you could be a millionaire and have a shit value system.
Oh yeah, there's plenty.
But at EBV, I think that would be hard to find.
I'm so excited now. I can't wait. I know you shouldn't wish your life away, but like I've just heard so many incredible, great things about that program, and almost to the point where it's like, if you are in business and you go through this program, it's next to impossible to fail in business
if you apply it.
Right. Exactly. Now, of
Yeah.
course, lead the horse to water, can't make it drink.
Right.
But like, I think just looking at it from my perspective, given everything I've achieved on my own without any formal training in business, trying to learn it myself, I am so excited because it's like, what is this going to unlock for me, and what am I going to be able to do with it?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yeah.
cool.
No, it will be fabulous. Yeah. And it's great because it's all free, right? Like there's so many veteran programs out there. I've done like the SBA stuff and the SCORE and right, like yeah, I've gone to those, and there's nuggets. You always walk away with a nugget of information, but the Syracuse program, I walked away with way more than a nugget of information.
For sure. And I just went through the Boots to Business reboot through them. It's like an introduction, kind of qualify you, opens up a bunch of resources for you. While I was largely bored in most of it, because it's a very introductory overview of kind of getting into the business world, there was still a lot of gems I took away from it, like a lot of their business plan templates, their lean startup business plan, so that you can kind of just put it on a wall and look at it at a glance and follow it, versus the long form. It takes you a long time to build, and it's like 50 pages long, and who wants to read through 50 pages to make sure you're following your actual business plan? You can look at the leans. There's a lot of good resources that have come out of it. And so I agree with you. Like, anybody listening to this, ivmf.org, I believe, or just look Syracuse University IVMF. I highly encourage you to take advantage of everything on that website because it's phenomenal. And then I think there's a bunch more once you go through EBV that you can unlock and qualify to go to more of their programs, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sold on Syracuse and everything that they have to offer. I don't see a world in which I don't take advantage of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Is really cool.
I mean, there's some stuff that I don't take advantage of because like I don't do government contracting, right? Like I'm not pitching for GovCon stuff. So there, like, there's lanes of things that I don't take advantage of. But yeah, I mean, their newsletter comes out and I'm checking it out. And the other thing that's cool about them is they have, like, you can go to their website and find other veteran businesses. So you can purchase and like support other veteran owned businesses by just going to their website and checking out I forget what it's called. It's like I forget.
Yeah.
I'll have to give it to you to put in the link. Yeah. But there, like whatever the exact name of it, I just go to Syracuse website and find it there. But like, so it's like you can keep supporting each other time and time again, right? Like I want to buy a certain product or a certain food or beer or whatever, right? Like you go and you find the people that have also gone through the program and have a great product, and you can just keep supporting each other, which is,
and not only that, but now you have a curated list of veteran-owned businesses for you to partner with, collab with, reach out to, help you move your business along in whatever ways you can come together and help each other, which is even more amazing, right? Like it's almost like an infinite resource for veteran business owners, and I just love it so much.
Yeah, I hope you get in. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
For sure. Fingers crossed. I think I'm doing the thing, the conversation on the phone with the lady who interviewed me to move me forward. She said she was impressed. I don't know if that carries any weight or not whatsoever, but sending that list of things to do to make yourself more competitive, like go get a green belt. Am I ever going to use a green belt? No, but I went and got a black belt. Right. So like now I have them both. Right. I also did some Scrum Master stuff just to show them that I'm trying to do everything in the business world I can to learn and make myself more competitive. And I dealt with the same thing that you dealt with, like the imposter syndrome. Like I'm a veteran trying to create a paid community for veterans to teach them about entrepreneurship. How is that a business, and why would they take me for this? And she was like way over impressed with what I was trying to build and like everything that I had done. And I was like, oh, well, thanks for squashing that for me, because, like there's this element of, I don't know if it's like embarrassment or just afraid to talk about what you're building because it is so kind of outside the box. And she was like, that's kind of what we look for, is like outside the box thinking, which is really cool. Thank you for indulging me in that.
They're so great. I could keep talking. Like I tell everyone, I tell my clients, I'm like, oh, you want to start a business? Great. You need to go to EBV.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do everything. Are you still on the road right now?
We're not. Well, yes and no. So we're settled. Our daughter is 5. And so she started school. So we do have a home now. But we still have the RV. So Walter, he got out of the Marine Corps and was trying to figure out like what exactly he was going to do. And he's always loved to cook. And so I said, why don't you just go back to, go get a degree in cooking? Like, he's not going to go work at a restaurant, right? The Marine Corps controlled our life for 22 years. A restaurant's not going to.
Is going to suck.
Yeah. So he's not going to go work at a restaurant. I don't know what he's going to do. But I was like, just do something that you love, right? Like, you've given 22 years in the Marine Corps, like, or 21 and a half or whatever it was. Like, give yourself something, right? So we're just north of Charlotte now. He's at a school in Charlotte going to cooking school, and our daughter started kindergarten. And so we're here, but we still hit the road. So like this summer, we hit the road. We traveled some. We're planning to hit the road again this summer. So I don't think that we will ever not travel. It's just going to look different, right?
Yeah. What was it like trying to start and grow this business on the road?
Maddening. So we have a Class C. It's like 26 feet. And when we hit the road, our daughter was two and a half. And so there's no workspace, right? And I'm the mom that puts the kid to bed at 7:00 at night. So then what, you know what I mean? So I was up every morning, like wherever we were, I was like, what coffee shop is there? What's the earliest the coffee shop opened? If it was 4, I was at the coffee shop at 4. If it was 5, I was right. Like I was at the coffee shop. And so I would work from there, and then I would come home and we would have our day, our afternoon. And then many times I would go back to a restaurant or somewhere else and finish working that night after she went to bed. In some places, right, like we went to the Florida Keys. The campsite that we had there was great because like I could just work outside, right? And so that was amazing, right? Like just sitting there outside by the water in the Florida Keys in December, like it was beautiful and wonderful and dream working, but it was hard. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was grueling work, and it really was just a matter of just do it. Right. I mean, there was no options. Like I could have not worked, but then we could have not traveled. Like there was no alternative. Like I loved what I did and I wanted to keep doing it, but we also had this amazing opportunity, right? Like Juliet wasn't in school yet. Walter had just retired, and I'm completely mobile, right? I just need my computer and internet and I can do my work. And so we've always loved traveling, right? And so we were like, this is the perfect time to do it, right? And so it was like, if we're going to follow our dream, then that just means work is going to be hard, and I'm going to have to drink a lot of coffee. And I did,
Well, there's like an element of proving to yourself, like, yeah, this is difficult, but I can still make this happen. And if I can make it happen in this environment, imagine when we get, our daughter starts school, we have a place, we're still going to travel, just not as much, like constantly on the road. Imagine how much more productive you can be. And I'm sure you've probably found like having an office in your house or whatever your setup is, you are probably way more productive than going to that coffee shop in the morning and then having your afternoon and going to the restaurant at night.
Right.
Yes. So it's
more
awesome.
more productive, but more lonely. So when I'm in the coffee shop, people come in and they chit chat because people who are coffee goers are chit chatty people. And so I got to meet so many cool people sitting in the coffee shop. And granted, like there were times I had due outs to clients and someone would come and they would want to chit chat for 30 minutes because they see me working, right? And they're locals. And so they've seen me there 3 days in a row or whatever. And now they're curious. They want to know what I'm doing. And so we chit chat for 30 minutes. So I got to work a little longer, but I actually picked up some clients on the road, right? Like people who would be like, what are you doing? And yeah.
I don't know. I've tried to work in a coffee shop. I just get too distracted. I like to talk to people.
You need headphones.
Yeah, but then there's like an element to me, and I know I should probably let this go, but like I don't like wearing headphones in public because to me it takes away from my situational awareness. And this is something I can't let go of. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. It's like hard enough for me to do my long walks in the morning with headphones in, which is why I don't most mornings, because I don't like being run up. This morning, I actually had headphones in, listening to my Discover Weekly playlist and just kind of getting in the mood for the week. And like the kids on the bicycles almost running me over coming from behind because you can't hear them, or they don't say anything, or they almost hit the dogs. And it's like, well, this is a good way to piss me off in the morning. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, it just not for me. My wife and I had considered buying an RV, selling everything and just hitting the road. And I wish we would have. It didn't work out at the time, and there's still time. It may. I looked at outfitting the RV with solar panels and getting what the hell is it, Starlink, so that we could just have internet always and just be on the road and work and just be in nature. And it sounds like an absolute dream. I'm glad you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you have the dream to do it, you should do it, right? And you can like just rent one for 3 months or whatever, right? Like you don't even have to buy one if you don't want to. But I think if you have the itch to do it, you should give it a go, right? Like maybe you don't sell everything, right? Like we did that. We sold everything.
That's what we were going to do.
Yeah.
I told my wife, I was like, look, if we do this, we're selling everything. We're committed. We're doing this for a year. I don't care how much it sucks. 1 year period is how long we're going to commit to this. And she was all in on it. And I was too. She ended up going to sea school to get her license to cook on boats. And so that kind of squashed that idea. But, whatever.
Yeah, but to your point, there's still time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, we met so many people RVing who were retired and they had always had the dream to travel. And, they still have their home, some of them sell everything in retirement and then travel. Those are the people with the really nice Class A's. They have spent much longer time of their life investing in their plans and whatever. But yeah, I think don't let go of that dream. Don't let go of it.
No, absolutely not. No, there's a world in which we definitely do that in the future. What are your plans for the future? Looking ahead, what do you have, in mind for the business, for you and your husband? Like, what are the plans?
Yeah, we're still sorting some of that out, right? Like he's got to figure out what exactly he wants to do once he finishes school. We've always had a dream of a farm. And so we're trying to figure out how we can blend my business with getting a farm and then him with culinary stuff, right? Like we don't want a restaurant. So what could he do to bring that into farm life? But yeah, someday soon we're going to start building a business plan for a farm. But I can't, like, I love my clients, right? And so it's not just the work that I enjoy, but it's the people that I enjoy. And so when I think about starting a farm, I'm like, well, I still have to have the business because I'm just not ready. Perhaps I get to a point where I stop taking new clients, but I'm not ready to close this down for the sake of a new dream, right? So we're trying to figure out how we can kind of blend it all together. The business is growing well.
And my wife need to connect because my wife has the same. She wants a farm. She wants goats and chickens, and she wants to figure out a way to blend a farm and food and make money off of it because same thing. So those two need to like email back and forth or whatever, because I'm sure there'll be some great ideas born out of that I could probably get behind. Like where we're at with my wife right now, it's like, no, I don't want to buy a farm. I grew up in the farms of Indiana. I know how much work that is. I have no desire to do the farm thing. She's like, well, I'll do it all. I was like, I don't think you understand how much work it actually is. Right. Like, and I know that I'm going to end up roped into all of that work. Right. So I definitely think they should connect and see where that goes.
For sure.
One message you want veterans to take away from our conversation today about becoming entrepreneurs and the transition itself?
I think the key is probably figure out what like gets you up in the morning, the thing that's like the fire in your belly, right? And do that. Like while you're in, you figure out you try new things and you meet new people and you experience new cultures. And there's something there that like excites you. Do the thing that excites you and then you'll make money. Don't chase the money. Right? Like I watch too many people think like they get out and they're like, oh, I'm going to go make 6 figures, whatever, here, there, whatever contract. Yeah. I mean, you can have a good life or you can have a fun life and do what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. And don't give up, right? Like, I mean, I think that's the other thing. Like keep chasing until you get to where you're enjoying life.
I love that. Tell everybody where they can connect with you, find your services, hire you, like I will be doing at the end of the year.
Wonderful. I'm at kristenstaxservice.com. You can find me there. I'm on LinkedIn as well and Facebook.
Awesome.
I don't do Instagram.
I don't either.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kristen, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Please don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, download, all that good stuff. Help us get this in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40. Also, the Stronghold is now open again. Lots of awesome stuff going on in there for veterans, changing people's lives and helping them get through the transition. I strongly encourage you to check it out if you haven't. We are welcoming, and it's a member-driven community. There's no fluff. There's no bullshit. We will only build the things that you tell us that you need. So come join, see what it's like for yourself. I'd love to have you. I give you Kristen Morgan.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.